This conference will now be recorded.
So, hi everybody. Anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Susan Cooper. I'm on the select board. So, I should start by saying I was going to introduce and thank the fire chief, Sean Tryon, and deputy fire chief, Chris Tryon. But guess what? They're on a call. So they're coming, but they'll be a little late. It's a Saturday morning, which apparently is a really common time for there to be calls, along with a common time for there not to be a lot of volunteers. They're all here, I guess. Anyway, so without further ado, I'm gonna get started. I'm hoping that if you haven't already, you'll go back and read the articles I wrote in the last two issues of the Monterey News. One's kind of long because this is a long story. There have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours put into this over the last year. Both of the fire chiefs have been working on this. We've gone over, I don't know how many plans. Why are we bothering? Here's why. That's actually from a Monterey fire. Our goal, oh yeah, people usually are asking me to do the opposite. No problem. So we want to provide continued emergency services. That's what this is about. This is about the fact that for years, for the last 100 years or so, we've relied on volunteers to provide our emergency services. It's just not going to be viable anymore for the simple fact that there are fewer and fewer volunteers. And at the end of the day, if you want the service, you're going to have to pay it done. We want to see us maintain or improve our response time and the quality of response. Of course, we want to control the cost, but people are expensive. Oh, look, yay, fire chiefs have arrived. Thank you, fire chiefs. And we want to work on building cooperative agreements with the neighboring towns. We've had a cooperative agreement called mutual aid for a long time, but that's going to have to evolve and change to meet the growing needs because that system was designed for a mostly volunteer service. I should, in addition to saying something to the fire chief, I also want to thank a lot of other people who were involved in planning this and in putting today together, including Roger McDonald, who's been an endless source of a sounding board for talking through lots of possibilities and finding flaws in plans. Frank has been a really, I should say Justin too, but he has to recuse himself from All Matters Fire Department, which I regret because I think his opinion would be valuable, but he can't offer it. So, and Frank, the members of the Finance Committee, Eileen Marcus, Jeff Zimmerman, and Steve Pullen have been really valuable as well. And a lot of members of the community who have spent time coming to me and talking to me and poking at the thing to make the whole plan better. So those things are really appreciated. That was what I was talking about. Anybody notice something interesting about that picture? Thank you for noticing that. There's more people in the background back here. There were other people there, but yeah. So this is not here. This is a national trend. The one on that side is volunteer firefighters going down. The one on that side is calls. They're not on the same scale, right? Notice that. One's in millions, one's in thousands.
No, Susan, those fire department calls, those include medical calls.
That's a good question. I'm not certain. Some will and some won't. So I'm glad you brought that up. While you're looking at this, I'll talk some more. One really weird thing is that ambulance services are not considered essential services in the United States. Ooh, why? Because almost every urban area, in fact, every urban area of which I'm aware, plus a lot of other areas, for instance, all of Massachusetts except northern Franklin County and Berkshire County, ambulances are under the auspices of the fire department. They're covered by its umbrella, and fire services and rescue services are essential services. So since the ambulance company is part of the fire company, they get rolled in. So when the lawmakers go to call something an essential service, they don't worry about ambulances because clearly they're under fire services. Make your own conclusions from there. Plus, it's getting harder and harder to be a firefighter, probably for some good reasons, right? Training people is good. We have expensive equipment that's hard to use. This is a hard job. When you go into a fire, you're wearing a breathing pack. What does that equipment weigh? About 65 pounds of gear you're wearing, right? Going up a ladder or carrying somebody down with that equipment on you, breathing air through a tank. Or if you're an ambulance person, you're carrying somebody out of there, right? You all know there's a lot of houses here with stairs. Can you imagine being carried down those stairs by 75-year-old volunteers holding that thing? For some of us, that might not be bad. For others, that would be a little scary. Hope he doesn't trip. It's a lot of training involved, and the requirements keep going up and up. And not just the training requirements, but also the record keeping and administrative requirements. I believe, was it the Richmond fire chief who a few months ago in the Berkshire Eagle said that it's going to be over 1,000 hours. He's like a paid volunteer, right? He's getting a few $1,000s from the town. 1,000 hours of bookwork and record keeping for running the Richmond Fire Department. And he's like, I can't do this as a volunteer. I don't have those hours. This is Monterey. Okay, 1978, according to the annual report for Monterey, we had 21 firefighters and 15 calls. Last year, we had 20 firefighters, but 12 of them were from Monterey and 8 of them are from out of town, which we can do because we have the shift program that they put in a few years back, because we knew we had fewer and fewer volunteers. And the shift program allows people from out of town to fight fires in town by being present and being paid to spend the night in the firehouse. But that's the number of fire calls. We're already up for this year. What were the number you sent me this morning? Like up 20 calls already from the beginning of the year? Yeah. Is it pertinent to just this? Yeah.
Those 187 calls, are they just from Monterey or other communities included?
What was the mutual aid in there? Was I think about 35 calls in that in the calendar year?
Yes. 35 from Monterey?
About 18% of those calls were for out of town, where we went to mutual aid.
Do you break the calls down by severity? Is there some kind of categorization?
Yes, there is. The fire department has to log it in a computer system. I think it's run by the state. So there is a breakdown by what the different calls are. Everything from call.
I'm wondering if technology has possibly increased the cost because of fire alarms and and false alarms, so.
No question. Plus that also includes medical calls, which is what it runs close to 50-50 in our town. It's a little higher one year, a little lower one year, but it's close to 50-50 medical and fire. But yeah, a lot of them are fire alarms, but sometimes the fire alarms are actual fires.
Absolutely, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Are some of these responses to motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
Very small percentage, just right around 1% for last year.
So that's the roster, the official roster from 2024, last year. That is the roster when you take out 2 people who were injured or got ill and can no longer serve at this time. That's the roster when you take out people who were either inactive or have moved out of the region. So now we're down to 18.
I'm sorry, down to 18 firefighters?
That's correct. That's 18 people that are active and live in the region. That's after you take out people who will be at retirement age within 5 years. Now I'm switching gears a little bit. So we're down to 13 non-retired firefighters.
Starting where?
From 20.
20, okay.
So now we talk about people who live in town and people who work in town. This is the roster of people who do not work in or near town. So during the day, there are 6 people available, plus we happen to have 2 firefighters who work for the DPW operations, the road crew. And they've been invaluable in the last few months because Jim Hunt was also a firefighter and he's out with an injury. And a lot of you know Del Martin has been taken ill and he was really invaluable to especially daytime calls. This is what it looks like at night. These are people who don't live in town. So we got 10 people available plus 2 more if there are 2 on for the night shift. And that's what the situation looks like 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Right? It's starting to look a little squishy, right? So this basically sums up 5 years from now. During the day, there'd be 4 plus 2 on the DPW if those 2 people still happen to be working here. They're young men, and you never know. They could stay, they might go. And that's what we got available at night. Mind you, keep in mind, not all firefighters are actually equivalent. Not all firefighters are capable of taking out a big truck, feel comfortable with those $1 million vehicles, or know how to run the pumps or the other equipment on them. So just because someone's in the firehouse doesn't necessarily mean that person can run the fire truck or drive the fire truck, right? Some people are learning. You got to start somewhere. So that's another big piece of it. Just having that person on the list. They may not be an interior firefighter. That's fine. We need people outside too, supporting the firefighters. But at the end of the day, if there is a fire, someone needs to know how to handle it and what to do. So I think that kind of speaks for it all. This is not a solo activity, right? This is not something a single person is actually capable of doing by themselves. Fires take a lot of people. How many? Well, technically, actually, I should say that the number from the NFPA is actually 4. They make allowances for rural areas, recognizing that many fire departments are volunteer and simply don't have the personnel. But it's not really safe for people to actually go into a fire with that few people. And this is actually a low number, right? The real standards would be 18 to 24 people to actually fight a fire. So when you talk about mutual aid, that's the beginning of mutual aid right there, because nobody has that many trucks. Barrington can't field 6 trucks. No town. Can even Pittsfield field 6 trucks? Yeah. So 2 people on that list back there answered more than 130 calls last year. Right? I want you to think about if you're a working person and you're supporting your family and you're leaving your job, if it's only 2 hours for one of those calls, and some calls are quick, but a lot of calls are a lot more hours than that. That's more than 6.5 work weeks worth of hours just for those calls.
And that's not counting for the interruption, the impact of the interruption.
Yeah, or all the paperwork or resetting the gear, right? Just going back for a minute, I want you to look at that and think about those 2 people standing at the back of the room. They happened to be working in town last year. And right now, they're on the town payroll. We don't put them on the payroll and they get a job out of town. Who's driving that truck? Right? There's one other person on this list that can drive a big truck. And, he runs the library. Is he leaving the library to do the fire calls and shutting it down? It's a lot to ask for one person to be doing that. So that's why I'm here, right? I'm here because these numbers don't add up to me. And that's all the stuff that happens. We're like, well, we pay them for a call. Well, we're not paying them for that. And it's a lot of hours. Like the Richmond guy said, it's probably over 1,000 hours for him to just do the record keeping, state mandated reporting and the other stuff he's got to do, never mind researching fire trucks or maintaining vehicles, etc. I don't have to beat this dead horse, right? Okay. Yeah, I know. I feel pretty beaten up. So this is why, I'm here, and believe me, I know that this is going to be a lot of money. It terrifies me. I know that it's going to impact a lot of people. But you know what else terrifies me? Is dialing 911 and not having anybody come. Because we're not talking about slower response. You're going to hear about what's going on in other towns. We're talking about there not being anyone to field that truck or to drive that ambulance. So this is countywide. It's national. It's not just here, right? We're trying to deal with our own little piece of the pie, but this is going on everywhere. There's 3 towns that will have something besides us that will have something on the warrant this year. Egremont and West Stockbridge and Stockbridge. So this is what's happening in Egremont. I loved this quote. An all-volunteer model for fire medical response is antiquated and currently unsustainable. Egremont's oldest firefighter is 84. I reference it at the end. Anyone who wants to go read some of the stuff that I've been reading, there's references at the end. It'll be posted on the website. This is what they're proposing. 3 full-time firefighters, a chief, and 2 firefighter EMTs. It's important to keep in mind that neither Egremont nor West Stockbridge nor Stockbridge have sleeping quarters in their firehouses. They cannot go to 24/7 at this time because they do not have the facilities to house firefighters at night. So they're cobbling something together to get some kind of service and to begin the process. So they're planning building. It's not clear what that plan is going to be exactly. Rumor has it that the fire company actually owns another piece of land on which they're thinking of building a new firehouse. They have the fire company, fire department situation also. And I already said that. Stockbridge and West Stockbridge they're bigger towns. They've got a lot of calls and they're coming up with a more complicated plan, not surprisingly. So they've developed a shared services agreement to share costs for a fire department. It's over a multi-year horizon, going to go all the way up to paramedic level, and they're going to bring ambulance under the same bridge. Right now, West Stockbridge's ambulance is being served by the Richmond Ambulance Company, and Stockbridge is using both Lennox and Lee to provide ambulance services, but they are looking to bring those under one roof. Right now, they also do not have any sleeping quarters, so it's daytime only coverage. That's what 10-7 means. They currently have a chief and deputy chief. This year, they'd be putting on 2 new firefighters, and the shared services agreement is that West Stockbridge is going to pay for 40% of the command staff. Stockbridge is taking on the other 2 firefighters. Not surprisingly, they're going to continue to rely on volunteers. Everyone's plan is continuing to rely on volunteers. Just for clarity, Great Barrington has 5 full-time firefighters, and they're relying on volunteers. There was recently a fire at Coy. Barrington fielded the first truck. We fielded the second truck. Barrington's second truck got there after our truck because they had to wait for the volunteers. And just for clarity, what's the speed of a fire doubling in size?
About 3 to 4 times every minute.
So when you talk about minutes counting, they really count. So their bridge plan is going to be to continue using the other ambulance services through 2028. They're going to have to build themselves a new building that has sleeping quarters. I'll show you where they're going to site it in a minute. Eventually, they'd have 24/7 coverage all the way up to paramedic, including a chief, 2 deputy chiefs, and 6 firefighter EMTs or paramedics. So, as you probably know already, both Lennox and Lee already have full-time departments. Again, I don't know as much about the Lennox system, but the Lee system also relies on volunteers. They're a bigger town, they have more volunteers. This is, so they did 2 different studies. West Stockbridge paid for one and Stockbridge paid for one. This one shows those colored dots are possible response times from either the Lee station, the Stockbridge Central Station, the West Stockbridge proposed station, road proposed station, or the West Stockbridge current fire station. And basically this is where they're thinking they're going to try to site their new building. It's not a done deal by any means. But if you're interested in knowing more about that, they've posted their plans. They have a slideshow of their own posted on Stockbridge's website. West Stockbridge might also have it, I don't know. We spent a long time, Roger and I, talking to Mike Canales, who's the town administrator for Stockbridge. They put a lot of planning and thought into this. They had a big pool of money, which is going to help them do it. They're thinking Stockbridge is going to pay for the building, not West Stockbridge, because should anything dissolve, there won't be questions about who owns it. I don't know if that's what they'll end up doing because this is a big plan that's multi-year. Any questions on Egremont and No? Okay, cool. So what are our options? We looked at a lot of different options, and in the end, we really think we're gonna have to have 24/7 coverage if we want someone to be coming when we dial 911. We also think, we believe, as do Stockbridge and West Stockbridge and Lee and Lennox, that EMS services, medical services should be under the umbrella of the fire department in one box. It makes more financial sense, if nothing else, because if you have dual trained personnel centrally located, they can get to the call faster. There's a bunch of different health situations where that makes a really big difference. Minutes actually matter. I'll get you a second, Steve. Among the ones you'd be most familiar with would be things like an asthma attack, cardiac arrest, stroke. What did I miss?
Just all your general EMS.
Right.
Yeah.
Where like literally minutes matter. Care within the first 5 minutes is life or death. And having it closer is a big difference in time. What was your question, Steve?
So you mentioned about ambulance not being considered essential service, where this sounds like this is sort of moving some of those medical responses more actively into the fire department. Where's the breaking point where this would become considered essential services? And does the state provide some financial support once you had it qualifying as essential service?
Not that I'm aware.
Sean,
That's quite the question.
do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, moving towards it.
Personally, it is an essential service in the town of Monterey. You know, there's no ambulance here, so the fire department is your first responder. So whether you pinched your finger or you're in cardiac arrest, you need us to show up. So to me, that's essential.
But what he's saying is, can we get money from the
Can we
state to
get
help
money
us
from
do
the
it?
state?
I don't think so.
The state doesn't, if you read the Eagle paper last week, Lee Davis gave an interview on it, and she highlighted it is a problem because the state hasn't declared it a service. And Connecticut and New York State are ahead of the curve on doing that kind of declaration. And it'll make it more competitive for our work, because if we go to get people, they'll go to a state program, you know, that we've got pensions, benefits, and that. She highlighted that in our conversations about ambulance particularly in the Berkshire County.
Anthony, we've also been talking to people on the seasonal designation committees to see if there's any money that way because of the swell that we have in certain times of year. So we're really looking for funding to do that, but right now there doesn't seem to be any.
So is Davis on this?
She's very aware of it from what I read in it. It's an interview that Eagle printed last Saturday in the weekend paper.
She's put in like 5 bills already. There've been a bunch of meetings. So the ambulance services are like Smitty Pignatelli kind of spearheaded emergency medical services task force. The point of which I think is largely to try to shore up Southern Berkshire Ambulance, who's serving our ambulance needs, but they're trying to serve more communities than they can actually functionally serve at this time.
And
yeah,
just
go
add
ahead.
one thing. That's not gonna come quick.
No.
As we know, as any state, that we're talking 5, 10, 20 years before anything changes.
It's so slow. So,
Do we have to have an ambulance to be able to get benefit of these?
no, we do
No.
not.
Okay.
Because having a first responder, it's a really good question. Having a first responder, an EMT, or even a paramedic on site, they can begin delivering care if you have a fly car or a fire truck before transport arrives. And that's actually why I'm suggesting it's critical. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, just a quick question about numbers. So how many calls, whether it was medical or fire, how many were we not able to respond to last year due to staffing?
We staffed every one, but that there was multiples at one person, which is not far from ideal.
So my understanding is though that we also have mutual aid with other towns in the area. Is that not the case?
It is the case when they can fill the truck. Some of the times that we're going to mutual aid, it's because those surrounding towns can't field a truck. So that brings up this thing. The bottom line here is that all of our neighbor towns are 100% in the same situation, right? Tyrium, their fire company is, how would you describe it?
Oh, yeah.
They're relying on Lee for their services, and they're paying Lee for those services. Sandusfield is struggling. The fire department is struggling. They've lost 2 fire chiefs in the last year. They've had a number of incidents that have been in the paper, so I won't belabor them. They're financially strapped. Does that sound familiar? New Marlboro, I don't know quite how to put this. You know that thing that I did with showing you what's happened with our firefighters? If you look at your roster and it looks like that, do you have a problem? No. There are a bunch of towns, not just our neighboring towns. I don't want to name the towns because that's, the complicated political landscape, who are looking at their roster saying it's all good because they haven't started saying, well, these are people who are inactive and haven't answered a call in so and so long. These are people who are going to retire. The reason it reached ahead in Egremont is that they realized they literally didn't have anyone to get in the truck that was allowed to drive it. The McNamara law says that if you're over 70 and the person gets injured in any way, you owe them $1 million and your insurance will not pay for it. We got at least one neighboring town that's in that situation and is hoping that no one actually brings a claim if that person gets hurt. That's how they're operating, because they don't want to accept that their people are aging out and that they don't have anyone there in the day. Otis is trying really hard, right? So they're trying to bring their ambulance company under the fire department part of the town, because right now it's independent, and they're reticent to talk about further agreements until that part is completed. They want it to finish coming under the town before they start planning the next phase. I mean, you can only lead the horse to water. You can't shove its head under and be successful. So we are in active conversations with the neighboring communities. And I think those cooperative agreements are going to be vital, because I don't think any of us can go this alone. But the reality is they are all in the same situation, right? We're going to them because they don't have enough people. They're coming to us when we don't have enough people or when we're on a different call. But we're literally talking about a moment by moment, because look up at those numbers. Those 2 people aren't in town. Who's going to be answering your call? And we're not talking about 5 years down the road. We're talking about July 10, right? When these guys go off payroll, if it gets turned down at meeting, they need to make a living, and they'll almost certainly be working out of town and not available to answer calls. So it hasn't happened yet, but are you hoping to wait till it happens? Because I'm not. I'm kind of risk averse that way. I don't like to wait for the disaster. I like to avoid it, right? I like to decelerate before I hit the wall. It's not everyone's preference, but it's my preference.
Susan, just out of curiosity, it says within 5 years on that. Go back to the
Yep.
slide. How many of those are within 2 years? And are we actively trying to get other volunteers?
Yes. I think there have been active efforts for recruitment. The big problem, Margie, is we have a decided dearth of young people who are able or willing to be joiners. Like, that's a national trend. If you go online and you look up volunteerism nationwide, you'll see all these people talking about how great it is that after all these declines in volunteerism, it's going up again. And then you read a little more closely and you find out almost all of the additions are what's called informal volunteering. It's people doing great things. They're checking on their neighbors. They're bringing so-and-so food because she just had a baby. They're doing good things. What they're not doing is volunteering for any organized organizations, including food pantries and fire departments. They're not doing those things. We just don't have the young people that are willing to serve. And frankly, they're probably have a hard time moving here because the property values are so high.
So how does that change
Still
it?
didn't answer the question. Of the volunteers who are gonna be retired within 5 years, how many of those will be within 2 years?
2?
One within 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so the number isn't going to 13 like tomorrow.
We don't know that. There can be injury, there could be sickness, there could be reasons to move.
But Margie,
It's
even
really
with that-
hard to count on that.
look at the count numbers.
I'm just asking a question.
No, I know, but I'm
We
saying,
can't answer it.
I
That's
see your
why
point,
we're-
but look at the call numbers. So even without that, right, we can count them as a person and they are a person. And I'm not saying answering 2 calls or 4 calls or 8 calls out of 187 isn't a value. It's a value. But is it gonna get the job done? I don't know.
So to answer your question, there's one person that's out, I believe it's in 3 years, and that would be the number 4 person on the list. The number 3 person on that list would have been out. Just turned 60, so he's mandatory after 5.
Here,
He's out on medical now, most likely not returning. And I believe there's 4 others that are also 60 and mandatory.
Okay, I mean, it's just a,
Just to answer.
It's a good question. No, it's a good question. It's a good question. Where was I? Hang on.
Ongoing, more.
Okay, so that's Stockbridge,
Ongoing. More.
You're on to Monterey's plan.
right, sorry.
There we are.
Previous one.
Previous slide.
That, so just to be clear, I think that the long-range plan is gonna have to involve the other towns. But anyone who's ever tried to, imagine trying to make a plan with 3 neighbors. It's,
long range, what's the timeline?
yes,
Seriously?
I am serious. How do I predict that? How do I predict when New Marlboro and Otis and Sandusfield will accept that they have to make a combined plan and figure out how to do
Okay,
it
so that
and
doesn't
sit down to
mean
the
just
table?
Monterey. You're talking about shared services.
I'm talking about shared services with the other towns that are contiguous with us that would make sense for us to partner with. And they all have to be ready to come to
No,
the
I'm good.
table.
It's clear. It's clear now.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something that's actually been a secondary benefit for our community from this. I don't know if everyone knows me, I'm Carly, I'm Sean's wife. And something that I have noticed is actually, we're talking about that, like, he doesn't really want to volunteer. They are actually showing up for the fire department. We have over 12 young people who come as part of the shift program. They get paid, but it's not a lot. And it's been really impressive, honestly, to see how many people from other towns, kids, who are interested in the fire service, who volunteer on their fire service, and then come to ours. I think because of the organized training and honestly because of the mentorship that these guys are giving to these young people. Sean, Chris, Mark, Dal, like there's kind of a crisis. I mean, for those of you who do know me, know that I'm a hardcore feminist, but there's like a crisis of masculinity happening with young boys, not really knowing like how to be men and opposed to women. And these guys are really providing them with that. And we have a 17-year-old son. We also have a 13-year-old daughter. It's not just boys, like very equal opportunity. There are young women up there. I was a firefighter in my, that's how I met Sean when I was 25 years ago. So it's an added benefit to our community that I think is really important. And I don't know if everybody knows that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was.
Thank you, Carly.
Has anybody thought of any mutual aid financial agreements with these other towns?
We're trying,
Especially
yeah.
Because we're gonna be the only firehouse where people can sleep overnight. So that means we're covering all the night for these other towns. So when we answer the calls to their towns, we should get money for that. In other words, and vice versa, but it has to be, I thought of now, I think it's something that can't wait.
So that hasn't traditionally been the way that mutual aid works. Do you want to speak to that, Sean?
So that's a tough thing to conquer, especially now the budget season has pretty much wrapped up in all these towns. So mutual aid is mutual aid. We give and they give both ways. To start charging back and forth, we would have to come up with a memorandum to make it work. Both towns would have to agree on that. If the other town doesn't agree, they're not gonna come to us and we're not gonna go to them, so everybody loses at the end of the day.
We happen to have an excellent fire department and an excellent fire company. These other towns are substandard, some of them, to what we have. So therefore, we're the ones that are being counted on to answer some of the calls in the other towns.
Frankly, I think that's an interesting perspective, but I don't think it's accurate based on all the numbers that I've looked at. I would say that, I'm not gonna disagree with the first part. I do think we have the best fire department, but I also think that the other towns are legitimately trying very hard to answer their own calls. And, they do put a lot into it and they do come here and they have helped here as well. So I don't think it's fair to say they're just gonna do nothing. I also think, it's an example. I don't know that it's the best analogy, but if I have a flood in my basement, I'm very grateful when my neighbor comes over with a sump pump. This happened to me, right? This is not an imagined story. He came over and he brought me his sump pump. I did go out and buy a sump pump, and then I was running 2 sump pumps. And the next time there was a flood, it was another neighbor. And guess what? We had 2 sump pumps and we took them both over there. Okay. And now we all 3 have sump pumps. And things work a lot more smoothly. I think it's important to remember this is sort of more like that. You don't not buy a sump pump because your neighbor lent you one, and you don't buy a sump pump and when your neighbor has a flood say, well, you didn't buy me a sump pump, so I'm not going to use my sump pump on your flood. You don't do that. You could, but that does not bode well for the community. It's not a perfect analogy, but it is similar. You're suggesting that they're getting a free ride, and I'm saying I don't think that's an accurate picture. And I think that a productive working relationship is going to be more complicated than we pay you when you come here and you pay us when we go there. I think it's got to be a more proactive relationship. I think it maybe looks like what West Stockbridge and Stockbridge are doing, where they're pooling into a common pool. They're using their volunteers, they're hiring people, and they're going to have joint payment for that service as a group. And I think that's a much more productive model than saying, I'll pay you a fee when you come here and you pay me a fee, but I'll get more because I'll be coming there more. I don't actually think that's a productive working relationship. It's my opinion, but I think we'll get more traction working together than we will pulling apart. But I think maybe some of this might be conversation we should save to the end so I can get through the rest.
Just to bounce off of that, how many of the 187 calls were mutual aid? Do you know that?
35, 18%.
Okay, so not a majority. It's not like.
By no means a majority. And by the way, that doesn't count the times they came here. That's a different number. So ultimately, let's see, we're talking about, this is Stockbridge. No, this is us.
This is us.
Ultimately, sorry. 24/7 coverage, what we're talking about for this coming year, FY 2026, sorry, I got so off track, I lost myself, is 24/7 coverage with 3 full-time people, a fire chief, a deputy fire chief, and a fire captain with EMS experience. Part of this plan is to have someone with more EMS experience so we can begin to plan for the next phase when we want to bring more EMS medical service under the fire roof. There'd be an officer on duty 24/7, and we know already that there's low volunteer participation on weekend days especially. So we'd have per diems, weekend firefighter EMTs on duty during the day, both weekend days, to ensure that we can get 2 people on that vehicle to roll it safely. And all of this will continue to depend on volunteer firefighters too, because newsflash, we have 1 person who can drive the truck in the firehouse. It's still not enough people to safely roll that truck. We still are going to need the volunteers to participate. We're projecting that in 2027, we'd have 24/7 coverage and we'd go up to 6 full-time firefighters. So we'd be certain to have 2 people to roll that truck, not just 1.
Do any of our surrounding towns have any full-time firefighters or plans to hire full-time firefighters?
So New Marlboro has 1. He's only on in the day. They don't have sleeping quarters.
Otis has three EMTs right now, a couple of them which are firefighters. They're aiming to go for 5 in this fiscal year,
So the
so.
second part of my question is, if they have some full-time employees, is it feasible that they could help provide 24/7 and stay at night in our firehouse?
It's an interesting idea. We're having a difficult time getting Otis, for example, to talk to us about formalizing a plan until they have those personnel, like, till it's a done deal for them. We are, however, no, I know, we are, however, you wanna,
So, yes, we are working at different models of moving forward, working together. It's not easy with politics involved. And everybody has a different theory of what we should be doing and how it should look. We've been working on it 2 or 3 years already,
Yeah.
and right now we're just.
It seems like a no-brainer. It's a benefit to all of these surrounding towns.
And at the end of the day, we still all need 2, 3, 4, 5 people on shift, depending on what town you're in, to cover the town, because when the pager goes off for a structure fire here or a motor vehicle accident, 2 people in our station or 1 person, whoever shows up, is far from being enough to handle it. So each town needs to pick up their own slack in a minimal way.
a shared service agreement is gonna end up looking like probably like shared command staff and something like a regional planning. But at the end, we're too spread out logistically to go down to so few firefighters, because it won't matter that we have the people if they can't get there in time to be of any use.
And Otis doesn't have sleeping quarters, but the select board is talking about getting them makeshift trailer for sleeping quarters.
Everybody's trying, well, Otis is definitely trying to plan forward. We just haven't, everybody's trying.
Not to put a too fine a point on it, but that is the exact reason, if you go back to the 3 main reasons we're doing this, is that other towns don't believe we're doing it until we actually nail down and vote on it, and then they have confidence that we're really doing this and show up. So it's almost, I don't wanna say a game of chicken, but it's kind
Yeah,
of
it's a game
like
of
that.
chicken is
Until we
perfect.
actually say we're paying for it, they don't believe we're gonna show up for them. So we're all kind of trying to bring it to our town meetings this year, so that we have a good base to move forward and know that the towns are all behind it, and it's not just talk. And that's why it's important in this budget cycle.
Susan.
Nikki?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what that weekend shifts are. You said 2, is it 2 personnel? I had seen someplace where somebody working 12 hours, 2 people working 12-hour shifts for Saturdays and Sundays. How is that?
Sorry,
So
my
that would be
brain-
per diems during the day.
Just during the day, just a 12-hour day shift,
So
no
there
night
would be
shift?
a full-time officer on, and then 2 per diems to supplement the daytime stuff.
So it could be 1 person doing Saturday, Sunday, 12-hour shifts.
Yes. Or, no.
12 per day.
12.
Chris wants
I think it's a daytime and a nighttime.
Yes. So
So-
nighttime we'll have 3 people on. Daytime weekdays will be a single person to start. And then the weekends will essentially be 3 from 5:30 AM to 5:30 PM. Because our call volume
That's
and
where-
lack of volunteers on the weekend is
So it's
just-
no nighttime
there's
shifts, just
nothing.
a daytime shift.
correct.
So it could be, so that's 2 shifts, it could be 1 person working those 2 shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Saturday.
Somebody could pull a 24
Well,
or
not
do
24,
do
no.
12 on Saturday and 12 on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'd still have shift people sleeping in as well.
Because that makes a difference with healthcare. That's why.
If we're gonna watch the part-time hours, if that's what you're asking, to make sure that they don't click over into full-time, if that's what you're asking.
We are
Yes.
tracking that, yes.
So if they answered, they work 2
Okay.
hour shifts, they work 24.
I was trying to wait to the questions to the end, but it's not working.
It's not-
More?
It's not your 40-hour work week. that we're basing this on.
I've heard, and Sean or Chris can confirm, that at least 50% of our calls are medical calls and not fire emergency.
It's about 50-50, yes.
Okay. Would it be reasonable to expect that full-time salaried firefighters or firemen in this program would obtain within a certain period of time EMT certification?
So at this point, we're not an EMT-based organization, so we can't operate. We have EMTs working with us now, and we can't operate at an EMT level.
But explain the process of doing that if you want.
He's asking how we get there.
How do we get
So-
there, Sean? Explain it.
So we have to apply to the state. It's a 2 to 3 year application. It's many hours of inspections, quite a bit of money to outfit a certain vehicle with the proper equipment on it. The state has to become happy with it. Then the town has to put a guaranteed plan for staffing of EMTs going in the future. Egremont is doing this right now, and the town proving they can have the EMTs next year at this time is a problem.
The good news is that the state is aware of the severity of the problem, and from
But
what you've said.
They're not, because of that, they're still not helping towns get up and running. They're making it just.
This is hard.
There's sticks in the mud, and it's the state of Massachusetts, and we need more ambulances, we need more EMTs, and they're just making more hours to get your EMT, and they're making it harder to get vehicles on the road that will transport people.
I thought you said that Egremont was finding they were fast tracking.
They were to a certain point.
Dang it.
Yes, the goal out of all this is to end up at EMT basic or paramedic level service.
We're trying to work there. It's just complicated getting there.
And Susan talked about the staffing plan, what we plan to bring on, how to address that.
Right. So you notice the fire captain with EMS experience is on there. The reason for that is this is one of the weirdest chicken and egg situations you can imagine. So in order to get EMS, and the same thing applies at paramedic level, but I'll just say EMS certification, you have to have the people on staff, and you have to show that you have the vehicle capable of doing it, but you can't run as EMS, even though you have to have it. So what people end up doing is becoming like in a partnership with an organization that has that certification to cover them under the umbrella so that they can begin to run the people, so that then they can get the certification, so that then they can do it independently. But it's like a complicated multi-year process. You have to have it before you can use it, but you have to use it before you can have it. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's how it works.
Yeah, you mentioned that Otis has a separate EMS service presently, is that correct?
It's going to
And
be,
they're talking about
theoretically, as of May, it will be part of the town. Possibly by July with the legal stuff done. They have to prove it at the town.
Is there any opportunity for us to partner with them so that they're providing the EMS?
Yes, there is. Again, we go back to personalities and timing and whether the town, because the ambulance there is a private organization right now. So they actually have to go to the state attorney general to get signed off to whether the town can accept that ambulance. So they're nervous about moving forward with any discussions to do any EMS because of, we are working with Otis Private Ambulance right now in getting stuff done. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to this, so. But yes, that is the theory that we're heading toward.
And once you go to EMS, we can bill for insurance, but then we have to hire a biller, and it's a whole nother process, and administrative stuff that has to happen. So it's not just, oh, now you turn on EMS, so there are costs.
But that would only be if we had an ambulance.
If we had an ambulance, I'm saying, but as when we go there, going to Jerry's point of can we bill for it? We absolutely can bill for that, but that's also a process.
Yeah, and it would mean having an ambulance. I think I covered all this already. So went, to say that we looked at a lot of different possible plans would be understating it. In the end, we're only presenting one to you. Those were what we came up with as the list of pros and cons for this particular plan. I can't say I'm thrilled to have, in my mind, if it safely takes 2 people to roll a truck, I would like to have 2 people in that house to roll the truck. But if I can't pay for those 2 people this year, then at least I'll have one person in there who's command capable, who knows how to run the pump, and who can drive the big truck or any of the vehicles we have. That's at least a step in the right direction, because you're not waiting for a driver that's capable of moving the truck, especially when those are currently in somewhat limited supply. That means, I'm looking at the con list first. That means there's a limited response if no volunteer shows, because you only have one person and that person may deploy. It's not particularly safe. It depends on what the situation is. I mean, I suppose if it's a lift assist, it's okay. If it's a car accident, he's calling for mutual aid. I think the monitoring overtime hours speaks to what Mickey was asking about. And obviously, what's the real downside of this? It's the cost. That's the thing where I can say I'm most worried about, besides not having any 911 service at all. That's the thing I'm most worried about. On the good side, it means that we do have a driver and a command capable person always there. We've got 2 firefighters, at least on weekend days, actually, I guess 3. We have improved response time because, let's just say, I've been having meetings multiple times. Our meetings about this have been interrupted when calls came in, and they were out the door very quickly, like impressively fast from my perspective, right? Just no nonsense, gotta go, up and out, and that truck rolled. It means we have an EMS captain who has experience in running people, which means they can start doing things like developing standing orders, making sure they have everything prepared for when they bring on more staff, can keep them actively occupied, can keep them training adequately, make sure they can maintain training records for everybody, and all the other stuff they're doing now and not getting paid for. All the administrative pieces, all of the hours spent driving around, talking to people about fire trucks and making sure their equipment's operational. The upside of having per diem firefighters is that if you're thinking you're going to be hiring in the future, this is an opportunity to actually work with that person in a hands-on way to know if they're going to work as part of your team. And anyone who's tried to hire people knows how hard it is to actually know if the person will work when you hire them. Right? Will this be a good person to actually do the job and work with? You can't always tell from just an interview. It enables us to maintain the same shifts as we grow. So we're starting with the shifts we're going to have. You don't have to get used to a whole new schedule, and you don't have a lot of losses because people don't want to shift to a different schedule. Better information transfer between shifts, because there's actually the opportunity for people to talk to each other. They're not, if you just have a day shift and you have different people on Monday and Tuesday, and they're there for 12 hours, there is 0 opportunity for overlap, which means whatever happened on Monday has to be communicated to the people who are operating on Tuesday. And the only way they can do that is through some type of writing. They can't actually talk to each other. And if you've ever been in a situation where that's a constant, it's not an ideal method of information transfer. At least it hasn't been for me. It means we'll continue to have, and I should stress that we are considered as good as we are because we kept up with solid training opportunities, and because our people care so much, they invest a lot of time and energy in not only training themselves, but training new firefighters and keeping that training up and keeping people fit and ready and having a thing where they can do, like, what would you call that? Demo fires or training fires? Training fires. Not a lot of departments don't have anything like that. It allows for improved oversight of staff, and it gives us the time to develop those shared service plans, because it's going to be a lot of hours, right? It's going to be a lot of hours of going to meetings, having conversations, reassuring people that you're a steady partner, helping them to navigate their own political landscape, trying to figure out how we can come to some type of agreement to share all of this work, because it's a lot of work and it's hard and people are afraid about it. And that's what it would look like for FY '26. There's a lot of numbers up here. Basically, you can see that the biggest change is personnel. So the big changes are the personnel and the insurance, health insurance for the personnel. People cost money. And, you know, for 100 years, we've been getting a service without paying for it or paying very little for it, right? And I can't speak for you. If you have children or grandchildren, talk to them and ask them how much service they're willing to do without being paid. I can tell you, my husband and I work with a lot of young people, and for a long time in America, we've told people their only value is how much money they make. That's what they're worth. They're worth how much money they make. And a lot of those kids are no longer willing. If you're not going to pay me, I'm not doing it. Because you've told me I'm only as valuable as the money you pay me. I don't think we should be shocked. It's amazing that as many people volunteer as do.
So I actually want to speak to this because I am this age. I was just in college and grad school, and my program requires internships. So I was surrounded by all the people my age trying to do internships to get licensure to be a therapist, to even complete their degree in counseling. We were looking around, seeing all these unpaid internships, and turning down internship opportunities that would give us better training because they were unpaid. We were looking at a world where that unpaid internship means we're taking hours away from work. We can't afford rent. We can't afford gas to get there. We can't afford food. Yes, I'm her daughter. So I've been involved a lot in this. But it is a situation where it's not just a question of like, oh, well, I'm not being paid. If I'm not being paid for my internship because I'm going to like work, how am I going to afford those things? So our generation is genuinely very concerned about affording necessities of life, and we're going to turn down anything unpaid because it actually puts our necessities in danger. So is it an unfortunate reality that volunteerism is falling? Absolutely. But it's a very, very real one that I can say I have seen from hanging around a lot with these people of this age who are like, no, I'm not doing that. And we'll even turn down minimum wage jobs because minimum wage is too low. Why would we do that? It doesn't pay well enough. It can't cover our needs.
This one's a big one. So anybody have questions about the numbers up there?
I just think, Susan, you might want to emphasize that the voters already agreed to spend $500,000 this year on the fire service. So we're really talking about an increase over that of $437,000 for the coming year. And that's to get our toe in the water, really. And that this year is really going to be about analyzing how this is going to work. Because we'll have some experience with full-timers, but there's still a lot of planning, and it's ultimately going to be a multiple year phases. So ultimately there's going to be a lot more money needed, but for the 2026, the addition would be 437 over top of what we're existing generally agreed to tax ourselves for.
Thanks, Steve. Other Steve?
And other Steve. He and I have served on enough boards that we'll always the other Steve, except for what he was. So are there gonna be people to actually hire if all these towns are headed towards the same labor pool?
That is an excellent question.
A captain with EMT capabilities.
That's an excellent question. You want to try and field it?
So, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
Some will come from within. Obviously, we're only starting with 3 this year. The word is getting out, and there's talk of, if the schedules are right, there might be some people, or fleet employees that might be willing to come down and help out. And I'm sure that's gonna be the same with other towns. yes, it's probably gonna get spread thin, but if we can pay people a reasonable rate and work together, we'll work our ways.
Are academies, are there academies, firefighting academies? Are they going to get built up to make it a viable career path for young people thinking 5 years, 10 years down the road?
Mostly, yes, it is the state of Massachusetts to start with, but when we put people in their programs, they will staff their programs, so there's instructors there.
Chicken and the egg again.
It's the chicken and the egg again. They've always been there, we're Berkshire County, so it's very tough getting them to work with us. Yes, I think it's partially on our shoulders, and it's hard being a volunteer to support the young people. We need to have internships at the fire station with kids and get into the schools and do programs to promote emergency services.
Right.
Because that's not happening right now, and partially because we're all volunteer.
Yeah. Right.
Who's gonna go dump 100 hours or 200 hours quarterly every semester to do that on a volunteer basis? It's again, the chicken or the egg, what comes first.
So we are, just so you know, among the things that have been on our plate, Eileen and I have been talking to Southern Berkshire Regional School District about stepping up EMT. They have done EMT trainings there in the past. Beth seems very open to the idea of starting that back up again. I think it kind of lapsed during COVID, but there's a recognition everywhere that we need more EMTs. It's BCC that's been running some EMT classes. Southern Berkshire Ambulance has run a few as well, but we need to see more EMTs. That's not going to speak to the firefighter. As far as I know, we don't seem to be able to find a firefighting-based curriculum that's intended to garner the interest of like juniors and seniors in high school, that sort of thing. Whether one exists, I don't know, but it definitely is already in our sights that we need to do that. The other thing I can say is one of the reasons Sean and Chris are enthusiastic about the 4896 shift idea is that people will drive for it. Because if you can sleep in the firehouse, you can work 2 days on and 4 days off, which means you're really only commuting once a week. And you can draw people from 4 or even 5 hours away. So it would mean we have access to a hiring pool that isn't all based here. That long term, that's not a solution, right? Because if everyone is doing that, then we're all drawing on the same hiring pool and we know there aren't enough people. But in the meantime, we have to start stepping up, figuring out how to get more people interested in not just that, right? We need plumbers, we need construction workers, we need electricians, we need a lot of things. And we need to start encouraging kids to work in those professions that are good professions and make a decent living.
If we're pulling from the same pool around the area, are there any provisions for increasing to be competitive? In other words, if
we're trying to, part of the reason the numbers are the numbers is because we looked at salaries being offered elsewhere and we're trying to offer competitive, we're not trying to like up everything because we don't want to start a bidding war, right. But we know we have to start up there. We know you can't hire someone for $20 an hour to do this job. No one will take it. Or if the person does take it, it's because no one else would take them, right? I don't mean to be rude, but that's the reality. So we're trying to be competitive. And it's another thing to know about firefighting is that unlike the regular laws, the Federal Labor Standards Act actually allows firefighters to work more hours than your 40 hours. So it's over 50 hours a week you're allowed to do. Technically, it's one of these weird things I don't understand. Technically, you can do even more than that, except you can't really. Because if you go over a certain number of hours, 9 24-hour days in a 30-day period, you've maxed out the number of hours per period, so you have to have a day off. They have a name for it. It's called a Kelly Day. trust me when I tell you that I banged my head against the wall of these calculations for a long time before I kind of came to a conclusion with it. But that's how firefighting works. So in addition to a competitive salary, we're talking 50 hours a week for firefighters. So it's a heavy load. They're carrying a lot. And at the end of the day, a day when you don't have a call is boring. And a day when you have a really horrible call can stay with you for a while, right?
You can hear more about this on April 24th at the Finance Committee briefing, but Roger has done a really good job of what we're trying to do now with all-inclusive budgeting. So you see right there what the insurance will tell us, an all-in number. So it's not that there are other costs, other places in the budget. But what that means is as we become more competitive with fire salaries and health benefits, we have to do that across the board for our entire town. It's not just one department. So you'll see that in the whole budget, and Roger does a really good way to show you how that happens. So that we're stepping up our entire game, because this basically means we're increasing our town staff by probably the biggest number we ever had. But that gives us a chance to really set a new playing field and remain competitive and to get out in front of it. And as was said before, the reputation of our department, we think will be what will help us to pull the staff.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about starting an entire new department that we haven't had before.
So if you could go back to the previous slide, the ambulance services for the current, or for the 26.
Yep.
That's proposing a $34,000 increase, which is Southern Berkshire Ambulance, is that correct?
Correct.
Is the long-term plan to continue with Southern Berkshire? Because if we're adding EMTs.
I'm a politician. I'm going to say, I would suggest you think about all the things I've said and draw your own conclusions.
So I just wanted to bring that point up. The second question is, in the firehouse now, we're fortunate enough to have the bunk room. How many people can that support? And is that co-ed or is that unisex?
Right now, we can support 4.
4.
Yes. Without doing something different, we can do 4.
Okay, that's good.
Good question.
That's an individual room, so each person gets their own bed.
Yes.
Don't have to worry about bucket. And, in my ideal world, we would be doing some type of shared services that are combined services with all the 4 towns. Getting there is the only reason I'm running again, because I really like not to.
This shared service stuff is just like pulling teeth.
Yeah, I understand. And, the concept of regionalization to me makes a lot of sense, but the reality of trying to get there is difficult.
And we're kind of late to the game.
Until the state kind of forces the issue and makes it viable and financially feasible to expedite that process. It seems like that's where there has to be a parallel effort.
Lots of places, lots of other states have gone to countywide oversight or district, but not Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Do you still have a question?
Yes, I did. So with respect to the budget, I'm just wondering if there's anywhere that we can cut something out of the budget in order to assist in paying for something like this. Because honestly, for somebody like me who's lived in Monterey my whole life, I'm finding it really hard to continue to live here. We had the astronomical increase in our property taxes last year. I'm trying to keep my land so that my son has a place to live. And when you look at a number like this is just going to add more costs. So where are we thinking about removing costs from the current budget to help offset this so that we're not all continuing to pay out more money?
Well, the only thing I can say is that having sat into joint select board finance committee budget meetings for the last, 6 weeks?
6 weeks weekly, welcome to attend.
We are going line by line, doing our very best to cut what we can. And I don't know, maybe everybody has the same idea of what they'd like to see cut. Should we not maintain our roads as well? Should we plow less often? There are towns that have made that choice. They literally plow less often. I don't know. I mean, we've cut everything we can come up with to cut. You're welcome to come look at the budget and see what you think you would cut. And I'm not trying to pawn it off on somebody. I'm saying we work really hard to do this. It's not an easy job. We'd had to tell a lot of people that the things that were on their budget ask for this year weren't gonna happen.
Sometimes level funding is a cut.
Yeah, sometimes funding is a cut, actually. You're right.
And, you know, over the last 3 years, we've worked really hard to do more representative budgeting. We've implemented something called zero-based budgeting. So every year we go back to every department and calculate exactly what they spend, what the costs are, what the current market is. And the reality is, and you see it in your personal lives, and we know this, the supply chain, everything is more expensive. So we, you know, like was just said, level spending is now a cut, but we are really working on it, and we have to really balance, you know, the seasonal needs. You know, we have a lot of nonprofit land that is not taxed here, so we have a lot of issues that we're trying to balance. So we'd love more of your input.
And we have hacked away at this proposal as much as we possibly can. This is bare bones. And if this doesn't come to fruition, this isn't a threat, but that no responders, there will be a day in the next year, many days, that there are nobody showing up when you dial 911.
At least not from our town, and we don't know where they're gonna come from.
They might be there in 20, 30, 40 minutes, but good luck with that.
Are you gonna take the job, Sean?
Yeah.
That's a real question.
But that is a real question, and we talked a lot about that, right? We wanted to be really transparent, it's not really my place to say this,
No,
but
go
should
for
we
it.
post the job, shouldn't we? The amount of time that the fire chief, the deputy chief, the amount of investment that they have made in putting this in, it is really irresponsible to think that we can hire someone new to fill those shoes with this plan. So we have really thought about that, and that is predicated on them knowing the system, what they put into place. And believe me, Frank can speak at it for about half an hour. There are a lot of more considerations about the relationship between the company and now the town employees. But these two people who have been in place and have really thought of this plan really are critical to moving forward, as well as their relationship with the other towns and their track record in firefighting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your service.
Less plowing could actually yield more rollover. I think that we can really consider.
Are you looking forward to going out in the ice?
Yeah.
So this one's about tax rate impact. So this number, that 437, 479.97 number at the bottom there, I'm pointing to my screen like you can see it. Sorry. Look, it's right here. Yeah, I know. It translates to that. Also in the info thing, the other information at the end of this that'll be posted is the link to the DLS website, Department of Local Services Tax Impact Calculator. So you yourself can go to that and plug in any number you want and see what it'll do to change your personal tax bill. Actually, it breaks it into categories, but it's very easy to use. You plug one number, you say what town you're from, plug a number in, and boom, you get the answer. Sorry, I left the dollar sign off. But I figured you'd know what it meant. Anybody got it? Like, do you want to know what scares me? What scares me is that.
Who's gonna move here to be a firefighter?
Yeah, or anything else. Because the people that are moving here are not people who are living here or people who are participating in town life. And that's a concern to me. Unfortunately, it's beyond my capacity to actually impact. So if anyone has ideas about that, feel free.
I had to change hands, I was getting so tired.
Sorry, I did. That was because I was facing this way.
And this is what I want to address, what it is costing the individual. I am not against this change, and I understand it all, but I also, the impact, I came up with different numbers. I came up with a little bit more, but in the long run, last year, we can start with last year, we increased the fireman's compensation, which was like 32 cents per thousand. And so this year, you've got it as 60, I have it as, I think, 80. But whatever.
That's a big difference.
In the long run, well, that's over $1. in the long run, when we get to where we need to be by adding more firemen, it's probably gonna be $2 per thousand. So when you have that,
I'm gonna say it's gonna be more like $1.50 per thousand, but I'm not gonna quibble.
so you're talking on a, and I'm talking about a cheap house, because evidently I have a cheap house, because I'm not, almost 800,000, I'm almost 500. Whew. And so that would cost me $1,000 more a year. I don't know, and I don't consider myself a poor person, but I don't know that I am able to comfortably, I have to give up something to add $1,000 to my taxes. So that's a consideration that a lot of people are gonna have. And as I said, I'm not against this change in the fire department, I can see it's necessary, but I also, I know what it's gonna cost. And I sit there and think, well, what would I give up? I already mow my own lawn anyway, so I am not gonna plow my own driveway. So that's the one service I have regularly paid for. Where can I give up? Cutting back food, cutting back things to make that extra money is going to be an issue for a lot of people. And I think
I'm worried about all the people that are going to the food pantry. I'm worried about people that are relying on their social security checks. I'm right there with you. But you know what I'm also worried about? I'm worried about the fact that the people living off their social security checks are also the ones dialing 911. And that house is gonna be even more expensive when they pass because there's no emergency services to help them, and then it's getting sold to another out of towner. I don't know what to tell you. If anyone, and I really mean this, if people have constructive suggestions for how we can do this for less,
I don't know.
or what we can do instead, I am all ears. But no one sees it, and I don't see it either.
Yeah, and remember, there are also a lot of us that have homeowner fees on top of that, because we have private roads, so the cost is getting prohibitive. So this is why, and there are representatives from the planning commission here, why all those things that are going out about what should we do about these tax rates or those, they're all gonna work together in the long run. Nor you say no, I might be saying no. No, there were questions on there about, but there are a lot of considerations, and there are some options, but they are big changes to this town. And it's very serious issues moving forward about what we tax, what we provide, because it is expensive to do business. That's what it is.
I think there was a question back there that.
I was just curious if anyone can, I don't even know if this is something that you would be able to find out, the impact on insurance to not have a fire department, because you also go back to, if we don't pass this, the two people there will have to take jobs out of town, and it might get down to, we have no fire department. We saw with what happened with Dell, we went from 4 people to run our daytime calls to 3, and with one of those 3 retiring soon, it's gonna be left up to these 2. And being in a small town, the jobs that they do, you can't rely on just this town for them to sustain a business in. So I'm not sure what having no department has an effect on your insurance.
Well, it will be, it definitely will increase insurance rates because we'll change our fire response category. In addition to that, and maybe, this is a horrible thing I'm about to say, but a lot of the home sales in Monterey have been cash, so it wouldn't apply. But if you can't get insurance because of no fire coverage, you also can't get a mortgage. So, if for those to whom that would apply.
Would it be a possibility to be more open to rezoning for business and generating restaurants, shops, things like that in this business district?
The business, I certainly would be able to do it. That's a question for the planning board, and for the town. Keep in mind that the business district we have, even if we extended it, is always gonna be limited by the water supply. The whole business district runs right along this river, and there's no water because the current Monterey Water Company is at its maximum capacity, so they can't add additional people to that, and there's no sewer. So we may have, apparently back in the 60s, there was the idea to make the town center Fox Hill Road. and to make a pass-through that went all the way to Beartown Mountain Road. And personally, I'm kind of sad that that didn't go through in retrospect, because we would have had a town center that actually had access to things like water and sewer, or water and septic systems.
What about opening up more area to businesses, outside of here, having a restaurant?
I would love to have a restaurant here or other destinations, but that's the planning board.
And that's what I meant when I said the planning board and important considerations, but also, we're not sure of the exact number, but almost, I think it's 40% of our land is nonprofit that does not get taxed. And what, right?
It's more than that.
It's more than that. So while we really value those nonprofits, the select board is trying to work with you to get what's called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. Gould Farm does give us one. We also, because, what is it, Bruce Pond, we do get some money from the state, but Lake Garfield.
You mean Beartown State Park?
Yeah, Beartown,
But that's okay.
but Lake Garfield, we, even though it's deemed land, we have certain expenses. So the balance here is really off kilter, exactly. And that's what I meant when I say there are other big choices that really have to be looked at.
Steve?
This is a comment that is no help at all.
Thank
you. Continue. But in fact, we've been getting a free ride for a long time. And taxpayers. And to introduce a metaphor, I'm on the board for the Monterey Water Company, and this year, beginning next year, we're gonna go from $430 a year to $600 a year. First increase in 20 years, which comes out at an average of 1.3% increase per year. So everybody on the water company actually has been getting a very low-cost ride for all of these years. Likewise, in our town, we've been getting by with a less expensive fire company than we might elsewhere. And we have a lot of non-resident owner properties. And that's an advantage to all of us who pay property taxes, and especially if we're year round. So I'm no more keen than anybody else to pay up, but I realize I've been getting a good ride for a long time. So, and like I said, it's no help at all.
No, it is not at all, because that's the reason why we really struggled, the finance committee and the select board, should we put this forward this year? What can we wait? And as you know, the last few years, our priority has been paying down any debt service, because we knew this day was coming. So we've really done a very good job of managing the long term with the capital needs. But if we don't do it this year, it's gonna be next year, and it's gonna be bigger, and we're gonna be behind the 8 ball. And that is exactly why we think the time is now, because like I said, everything is getting there, and if we don't start now, we will fall way behind.
I'm, just in the horrible event that this doesn't occur, I am stockpiling fully charged self-survivors. People are talking about income. There are vacation rental properties that there are fees at Airbnb or VRB or whatever that should be increased. So that
We
the
are
town gets some
currently taxing them to the maximum allowable limit in the state of Massachusetts. It's netting us about $100K a year. So, about.
We probably could do.
Right, and remember, that's a new tax that we just passed last year. So it's almost our third biggest revenue source, and we just have.
It's sad that that's the third biggest revenue
But
source.
that's what it is, exactly.
We probably could expand on that to some with some safety stuff, with working with the planning board. And there are ideas to work towards.
I mean, frankly, I'd like to see us not, I have opinions about how great it is for the town to be having, basically unregulated hotels, because there are people that we actually have some LLCs that are not, there are LLCs where it's families that have had the house for generations. There's also now LLCs where there's like one on a road near me. They're from Texas. They've never actually set foot in the town of Monterey. They bought it to run it as a hotel.
Yeah.
It's an Airbnb, but it's a hotel. So I have concerns about that.
I just want to thank you, Susan, and
and Sean and Chris and all the other volunteers that put countless hours into this. It was really clear.
Susan, the lady in the pink shirt.
I just want a question. So Stockbridge and Egremont are doing something similar. Are they simply gonna increase taxes? Do they have any other ideas on revenue that they're?
So as far as I know, Egremont's just using tax revenue. The Stockbridge situation is a lot more complicated. It's a mixture of tax revenue and some other monies that they had. They also had additional max levy capacity. I think there's another pool of money and I can't remember where it's from. Do you remember where that pool of money is from, Roger?
I'm sorry?
You know, Stockbridge had another pool of money. It's on their, part of it's on their plan. Part of it's on their plan that's posted. They have, it's a complicated thing, plus they're also talking about the money they're gonna use to build a new building on there. So it's not, it never gives you the complete picture from those things, but essentially, they're putting a bunch of it on their warrant. Not the whole thing, not the firehouse, not this year, but probably money to design the firehouse or choose a location, right, planning monies. So, I mean, the money in the end all has to come from somewhere. And if you didn't already have it in a pool of money somewhere because you got a settlement or because the state gave you some kind of money for something, I know the Stockbridge plan is, they're planning that some of the firefighters they take on in the future comes from what's called the SAFER grant, which is a FEMA grant for personnel specifically. And I actually said to the TA in Stockbridge, like, you know that money is not gonna be available, right? They're doing away with FEMA. They're gonna defund that. And he's like, I'm confident it'll come back. I'm like, okay. Okay, cool. Good luck with that. I mean, I hope you're right. I hope it comes back. I don't actually think it will. So.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question for this forum, but is there a way that the town is working or will work to find a way to get more tax benefit from the people who are not for profit?
From the people who are from the nonprofits.
Yeah.
Well, a big one is the state, and they give us the money they give us. We are, you know, Justin has been talking to really the only one that's left that's, how would I put this? As Justin pointed out, and I agree with him, a bunch of the nonprofits are actually exclusively holding properties that are for the public's use, right? So if BNRC owns a property, that property is available for our use, right? And people actively, can't speak for everyone, but I know I actively use a lot of those properties. And I think a lot of Monterey residents do. So we consider that to be a different kind of thing than something like Hume or a camp. Gould Farm is the other big one besides Hume, and they do give pilot monies and have for years. So we are actively working with Hume to see if we can work out something. I personally would also like to see them pay for the road that their trailers are going to be repeatedly impacting. We'll see what happens with that because it's going to be really expensive to maintain that road with their trailer park. I'm not supposed to call it that, but
Just don't maintain it. It's their road.
well, there's other people who live on it. It doesn't do the people who live there.
You have to,
I know.
but at this point.
Yeah, this is, I think, the last substantive slide, and it's really important. So with just this year, with just 2026 on, we cut the rest of the budget down enough that we would have been only 150K over the levy limit. So no matter what, we would have had to do an override, Prop 2.5 override. What we actually made the decision to do, and believe me, I've been tearing myself over that decision repeatedly, to go for the whole amount so that we wouldn't have to come back year on year to ask for overrides. I'm gonna let Steve Pullen, who has a lot of experience with us, talk about why that's a good decision and about the override. Lucky you.
Well, I have to tell you, I've spent a career in financial management and making presentations, and I've always been last, when everybody's sound asleep and wants to get down. So here I am again, but I will assure you, I'm gonna write a comprehensive article again for the Monterey News. So you won't have a quiz at the end of this, it's gonna be very brief. And so I do want you to know, it is complicated how the Proposition 2.5 works, but it existed in 1980 when Massachusetts was off the charts in terms of state property taxes. And 2.5 came in, said that basically towns can only increase their budget essentially 2.5%, which was a dramatic change. It helped keep the property taxes down. Massachusetts is no longer up in the highest tier, they're more in the average. However, it didn't do a thing to control cost. We all know health insurance, gasoline, fuel oil, all those costs go up. What do? So the 2.5 has been great to hold the tax down, but it hasn't helped one bit for cost. So what happens is they included in 1980 the ability for a town to tax itself over and above the 2.5% called an override. So how do you get to an override? 2/3 vote at town meeting, 2/3 vote on a paper ballot. So it's not easy to get to an override. The town has to really want it. Monterey has done it 3 times, 1990, 2006, and 2016. So we have done overrides, but not to the extent that this one's gonna cost over $1 million. So it'll be tough to understand why, but the reason for the larger amount is that ultimately, at the end of 3 years, that's what we're gonna need due to our budget. The current year, as we just mentioned, probably be about $100,000 of capacity that we will need. So that's not so difficult. But instead of doing an override for 100,000, we're gonna create the capacity to grow into it. So this is a new service, and that's really the essence of this whole presentation. This is a new service for the town. It's nothing like anything we've ever done. So we have added new services. We have a community center. That's a new service. We've expanded our council on aging. We added that to the budget. But this is a serious amount of money, obviously. So to get up there, we are going to have to ask for an override over top of what our budget's been. I will write an article about this, and next time we meet, I'll have a quiz. But, one thing I wanted to say about the average, we have 90 properties in Monterey out of I think, 1,300 taxable properties. 90 of them are over $900,000. It skews the average. So I went and looked at the median. The median is 1/2 above and 1/2 below. It's 460,000. So half, it sounds a little bit better than the 760 average, which is skewed by those high value properties. God bless them, they're paying these taxes on it. But, so that's one thing I want to say. And really, to me, it's the median where we're looking at. I don't know if I want to go any more granular than this right now, but, and I promise you the article will be a little clearer, and we're going to meet again next month. At this time, I don't think anybody could take any more about Proposition 2.5.
So how do we actually manage the override? We'll take a vote at town meeting?
Yes.
And then there'll be a paper ballot on another day?
Both.
The ballot and
Yes.
town election on.
Yes, the town election for elected officials, I think it's Tuesday after town meeting.
Right.
And that will happen then. So it has happened in the past. Some of you at least remember having heard the argument and approving it, and so we'll see what happens.
I'm hoping that it's possible the timeline would be more like a 5-year timeline than a 3-year timeline. It's not clear what the rollout would be. I don't know if that makes it better or not. But keep in mind that we don't just because we have the capacity to use it, doesn't mean we will use it. It just gives us the opportunity to choose to do so. And in this case, it gives us the opportunity to have a full-time staff next year.
Yeah, I
And
think
clearly,
the real
we would
reason
not be
why
using all
other towns are not willing to do this, because they don't want to go this step.
Yeah.
Because anybody that wants to go the next step to a professional level is gonna have to go through this, because current town budgets at a 2.5% a year increase are not gonna do it. So if our town takes leadership on this, I think other towns will say, yeah, we're gonna have to do it. They're gonna have to bite the bullet and roll with it.
We did have a meeting last week, as we said, and we did put we're prepared to put pressure on these other towns, and we are. We actively are. They know they have a problem. Like Steve said, they're just not quite ready to take that jump yet. Some are more willing, some are less willing.
Steve?
So going forward, what's gonna be the disposition between the fire company and the fire department? Or is that, let's not talk about it.
Too many moving pieces.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a question, but it doesn't need to be addressed.
It's being discussed. It's not being addressed.
It's being discussed. It's an ongoing process, like Sean said.
Yeah. Right now, you have pretty much the best system you can possibly have. It's the best of both worlds.
Yep.
Maybe it's not perfect, but it is actually saving money doing it the way we're doing it, so.
Keep in mind that having a volunteer company that's a 501c3 means that that company could be an opportunity to serve like the Friends of the Library do as a money-raising arm to help fundraise. The town cannot do that.
Right.
The only option we have is taxes. The fire company could. We gotta put a suit on him and have him go knock on doors.
Maybe I'll have time after.
Yeah.
The next meeting that you have in April, is that a continuation of this meeting or? is
If
that-
there had been a lot of unexpected questions, there might have been substantive difference, but I tried to pick a weekend day and an evening day to cater to people's different schedules.
Right,
So unless you have questions you don't feel were met here, which I would totally understand, and you could always come and talk to us after, I would say that there won't be a lot of new content, no.
That's not why I asked. I'm thinking about the people that I know that are not here right now, that should be here listening to this. Will they have that opportunity?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I was just thinking of that override. I know that my granddaughter teaches in a district in East Park, Massachusetts, where they did not pass the override, so therefore it's.
Yes.
You know,
Just so you know, if the override doesn't pass, there'll be another town meeting because it means we can't even pass our budget, right? So even if we pass the fire department budget as part of the budget, but we tank 2.5, there'll be another town meeting because we won't have an active budget. Just so you know.
What is the fundraising plan, since they can raise funds like the library and the.
Marty. I'm not buying you a donut. I don't know that I could say there is a plan. For one thing, maybe I should be, but I'm not currently a member of the fire company. So I'm not really in a position to make a fundraising plan for them.
So as a member of the fire company, and the reason why we're here is really due to the lack of volunteers. And one of the biggest downfalls, one of the biggest reasons people don't want to volunteer is that fundraising part of it, right? Because it takes a significant amount of time, and then we're asking them to run 187 calls, do a minimum of 52 trainings a year, plus weekends to do your first responder training, and on and on. So as the fire company, we want to keep the state burst going, because it's really the biggest community event this town has. But as far as outside of that, like the appeal letter, we've sent a few of those out in the past. Dell was really the spearhead of that, but it takes a lot of effort even just for a simple letter to go out. So it's tough to make our volunteers also fundraise, also run calls, also train, and also.
We've got an average age of 65.4, so maybe what we need is some people who aren't firefighters or active firefighters on the fire company to help them do that, because there are people who are on the Friends of the Library that aren't librarians. There could be people, you want to help raise money, volunteer for the fire company.
I was just going to say, I said to Cheryl, I will talk to Chris later, you really need a Friends of the Fire Company, as we have Friends of the Library, and no chair that you see in this room would have been here if we hadn't had Friends. And there are a lot of other things that have gone on, things that have been, actually, we could have gone back to the town and asked for money for doing things that we had to do, for making corrections to the building that we built. But we didn't have to, because the Friends of the Library have supported that. And for all of you that are in this room and have been Friends of the Library, our gratitude to you is unbelievable. We can't come close to thanking you enough. But we were able to do all these things without going to the town for added funds. We had never, and that was something that Don Colburn, may he rest in peace, used to say to me when I had to go with him to sign the papers, are you ever going to come back for more money? And I can't guarantee that, but we never have. And we're very happy to not have been able to do that.
I think if we had ideas for fundraising for the fire department, we would find many people in Monterey who could help with that.
Yes.
You know, like one of my things is I used to love the Good Farm Gala, dancing, lots of music, lots of fun. There's nothing like that in town. And one of them was at the fire department. Why not a feature fundraiser?
So that ended up, that was a real thing, while last district, that ended up, which is awesome.
Okay.
And not be it every now
So
and
we
then.
just come up with a very well idea, they're we can make money, and then I think there's something.
So just the history of it. There's lots of ideas, but actually getting those people to show up and perform is a different. It's been a struggle. There's been lots of.
What do you take?
Okay.
Okay.
I think it might be time to pull a plug.
Let's just focus back. We're at an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
I think people are getting a little restive, and me too. I do want to thank my daughter, because without her graphic design, the gorgeous presentation would have been less gorgeous.
I think it's
Anyway.
worth pointing out how fortunate we are to live in a small town where we can get together and discuss these things. Because if this question was being addressed in Great Barrington, you would see fewer people at the public meeting.
So, everyone, I would just like to thank Susan. She did a great job. I'd also, thank you all for coming too. I'd also like to point out a couple more things. Again, this is going to be on Wednesday, the 9th at 7 p.m. at the Monterey, of the firehouse up the street. Also on the 24th, I think here, there's going to be, the Finance Committee is going to do a budget presentation. And again, on the 26th of next month, April, at the firehouse between 8 and 10, coffee and donuts. They're going to have an open house down there. And so you can ask questions, bring the kids, bring the family, the grandkids, everyone's welcome. So that'll happen on the 26th. I want to say thank you to everybody who's come here today, and anybody who was also online and watched as well. And the questions were great. And don't continue to stop. Don't stop asking questions, because we're all here to ask. Thank you very much.
All right.
See you.